Gravedigger's wife. In the small, isolated town of Black Hollow, where graves outnumber the living, Elias Graves has been the town's gravedigger for decades. A quiet, stoic man, he carries out his work with an almost religious devotion. His wife, Mary Ann, has never questioned his late-night absences, until now. Lately, Elias has been coming home covered in more dirt than usual, his hands trembling, his eyes hollow. He no longer sleeps beside her, instead sitting by the window staring into the darkness. When Mary Ann asks what's wrong, he only mutters, "It's not done yet." One night, curiosity gets the best of her. She follows him to the graveyard, hiding behind an old mausoleum as he kneels by a freshly dug grave. But he isn't burying someone, he's digging them up. Elias leans close to the corpse and begins whispering, soft, urgent words that make no sense to her. Then, slowly, the body shifts. A skeletal hand twitches. The corpse turns its head toward Elias. Mary Ann stifles a scream. She flees home, locking the doors and pretending she saw nothing. But the next morning, the graveyard is as it always was. No sign of anything unnatural. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe her mind was playing tricks. But that night, she hears something outside. Scraping. When she looks through the window, she sees figures moving between the gravestones. Half-rotted, eyeless things crawling toward the house. She turns to Elias, shaking him. "What did you do?" He looks at her, his face lined with exhaustion and guilt. "I had to tell them." Mary Ann doesn't understand. Not until she sees a familiar decayed figure standing at the door. The corpse of her sister, whom they buried last winter. Elias begins to weep. "They told me things, Mary Ann. Secrets from the earth. About you, about me, about what's coming." And then the scratching at the door turns into knocking. Soft, insistent, patient. Because the dead are waiting, and they know things she doesn't. The Gravedigger's Wife. Part 2. Mary Ann stares at the door, her breath frozen in her throat. The knocking continues, soft, deliberate, as though whoever, or whatever, is on the other side knows she's listening. She turns to Elias, her voice barely a whisper. "What do they want?" Elias wipes a shaking hand across his mouth. "They want to be heard." The door creaks. Mary Ann stumbles back as the wood groans under the weight of something pressing against it. They're not trying to break in, they're waiting for permission. Her sister's voice comes through the door, muffled, broken. "Mary Ann, let me in." Tears burn her eyes. "Number, this isn't real. It can't be. You're dead," she whispers. "Yes." Elias sways where he stands, his skin pale as grave dust. "They have things to tell you, Mary Ann. You need to listen." Her heart pounds as she steps closer to the door. She presses her palm against the wood. "What things?" The voice on the other side trembles. "It wasn't an accident." Mary Ann's blood turns cold. "What?" "My death." Her sister Edith had drowned in the river last winter. Mary Ann had always blamed the icy waters, the treacherous currents. No one had seen her fall in. They had simply found her body, limp, blue, her eyes open and staring. But now, a corpse was telling her it wasn't an accident. She whirls on Elias. "Did you know this?" His lips press into a thin line. "The dead know things we don't. Things they couldn't speak in life. I only gave them a voice." Mary Ann grips the doorknob with trembling fingers. She has to know. She opens the door. Edith stands in the doorway, her once beautiful face half rotted, her hair wet and clinging to her skull. Her lips curl into something like a smile, except there's no warmth in it. Behind her, dozens of figures shift in the darkness of the graveyard. Some missing limbs, some little more than bones, all of them waiting, watching. Marianne sways, bile rising in her throat. "Tell me," Edith steps forward, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "You were supposed to die that night, Marianne." A sharp gasp escapes her lips. "What do you mean?" "Someone pushed me. Someone mistook me for you." The world tilts beneath her feet. No, that's not possible. But Edith isn't done. "They're still here, Marianne. They know you lived." A cold wind sweeps through the house. The dead in the yard shift closer. Marianne turns to Elias, horror dawning in her eyes. "Who?" But Elias isn't looking at her anymore. His eyes are fixed on the shadows behind her. And then a new voice speaks, one that doesn't belong to the dead. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Someone else is in the house and they've been waiting too." Gravedigger's Wife, Part 3. The voice sends a jolt of terror down Marianne's spine. She knows that voice. Slowly she turns. In the dim candlelight, a figure steps from the shadows of her home, a figure she has known all her life. Her father. Samuel Blackwood, the respected mayor of Black Hollow, a man of wealth, power, and secrets. He stands in the doorway of the sitting room, his face calm, unreadable. In one hand, he holds a silver-tipped cane. In the other, a knife. His gaze sweeps over the open door, the dead gathering on the porch, and finally lands on Marianne. A slow sigh escapes his lips. "You should have stayed ignorant, child." Her stomach twists. You pushed Edith?" His lips press into a thin line. "No." For a fleeting second, relief washes over her, before he speaks again. "I told them to." Her breath catches. Samuel tilts his head. "You were always too curious, Marianne, too difficult. You never understood the importance of keeping things buried." His eyes flick to Elias. "And you. I should have known you'd start listening to them, digging them up." Elias grips the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "You can't hide from them anymore, Blackwood. They know what you've done." Outside, the dead shift closer. Edith steps inside, her rotted lips curling back in a grin. "You made a mistake, Father." For the first time, something flickers in Samuel's expression. Not fear. Annoyance. "I made sure you wouldn't talk. I made sure you would rot under the river." His grip on the knife tightens. "But that damn gravedigger couldn't leave well enough alone." Marianne's hands tremble. "Why? Why did you want me dead?" Samuel sighs, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Because, child, you were always going to ruin everything." A pause. A realization slams into her. Mother. Her father stiffens. Marianne's voice is B,